Every year on the 9th of May, the world remembers. But look closely at the footage of the greatest generation and you will notice a void. Over 1 million Africans who marched into the fire of the Second World War weren't just colonial forces, they were the strategic spine of the Allied effort. Yet, today, their names are missing from the monuments in London as well as Paris. History that was not lost, but deliberately hidden from the public eye.
My grandfather, Chief Ihunwo III, Sunday Bikoluchukwu, royalty, he took part in the Second World War. He fought in the capacity of a medic in orthopedics. He served in Gibraltar, in the West African frontier, the Royal West African frontier in the Nigerian regiment. And we had Northern Nigeria that took part, we had Ghana, we had, So basically at the time, these were colonies. These are colonies of European powers, France, United Kingdom. And so that's what was actually, to be honest with you, this was actually like really far from the shores of Nigeria. And so those who took part in this war, they actually did not fully comprehend the extent of what they were actually getting involved in, to be honest with you. And so it was when they got there, they actually realized that this is actually such a huge undertaking. This was actually like a really, really big war. For Nigerians as a whole, as Nigerians as a people, we had a civil war, the Biafran War in Nigeria. That one is one that most Nigerians actually remember. But for the Second World War, most Nigerians don't actually really remember or preserve the memories from that era.
Consider the life of Chief Sunday Bikoluchukwu in the River State of Nigeria. He was a man of medicine, a traditional orthopedic healer, royalty among his people. But in 1941, the British Empire saw not a healer, but a tool. For years, his hands mended the broken bodies of a war he did not start. When the smoke cleared, the West kept the glory. They sent the healer back to a silence that lasted 80 years. This wasn't one tragedy. It was a colonial doctrine. From Senegal to Kenya, the pattern was clinical.
My father didn't choose to fight for France. He was taken there against his will as a result of colonization. He and his comrades were forcibly conscripted in 1940. I was just a small child at the time. It was September 1940. When the time came to receive payment, France, which was responsible for paying soldiers from Senegal, backtracked. It executed those who had saved them.
While white veterans were given land and pension, African heroes were discarded like spent shells.
Ogogo Gembo was born here in Osik Kamser, near Congo. And on 4th of September 1941, he was enlisted to Second World War. He took part in the siege of Tobruk. That was where the Germans were. And they fought the Germans until they managed to push them into surrender. My father was not happy that he was not recognized. Like many African veterans got recognition elsewhere, he was not very happy that he did not get compensation.
This betrayal changed Africa forever. Men who had been trained to fight for global freedom realized they would have to fight for their own. In 1948, the British killed protesting veterans in Ghana, a move that sparked the riots leading to the continent's first successful independence movement.
I was standing before all of them were killed. Sergeant Udate Lamte, Patrick Atipo, and then Sergeant Adite. I was standing just few yards, about 6 feet from behind Sergeant Adite when they were all killed. I was there at the crossroads, 1948.
Decades later, the struggle is about the history that is often missing from the textbooks. Younger generations just remember Nigeria, and they are growing up unaware of the sacrifice of their ancestors who helped win the Second World War.
My family, of course, we know about it, we're proud of it. But in Nigeria, this is not actually spoken about as much. It's not taught in the history books. Specifically, I would recommend, first of all, doing justice to the history and adding this to the history books in Nigeria, which is where I'm from, which I believe would go a long way to inspire that pride, that we actually took part in this war. We fought this war. We took part, a huge part in the defeat of Nazi Germany and the Axis powers in the Second World War. I think that will go a long way.
On this Victory Day, the truth is finding a home where it cannot be silenced. Thousands of kilometers away in Russia, the story of Sunday Bekwele Chukwu and the million forgotten heroes is being etched into prosperity. But RT also making its contribution and declaration, saying that your sacrifice was not in vain, your bravery was not invisible, your memory lives on forever.
We are right outside the Victory Museum here in Moscow, where upon our initiative by RT, Emanuel Chokbanda's grandfather has now been commemorated in this important historical space dedicated to the struggle against fascism and the accomplishments of individuals who contributed to the victory in World War II. Sunday Bekwele Chukwu's inclusion in the Faces of Victory Hall is not only symbolic, it also marks a shift in how personal stories are viewed, acknowledged, and preserved on an international stage. For decades, stories like his were overlooked, mostly confined to personal archives or fading family recollections. And so, to have his story and photograph displayed here affirms that his contribution matters not only locally, but as part of a shared global history. His story will now be preserved within the archives of the museum, serving as a lasting testament and ensuring that he will not be forgotten. But in addition to him were tens of thousands of other African soldiers whose stories only live through family memories. And today we're bringing some of those memories to a wider audience. We sat down with Johnson Emanuel Chukwuka, who is the chairman of the Russia-Nigeria Trade and Investment Advisory Council, but a man whose grandfather heroically fought against the Japanese in Burma in World War II. And we're here to learn more about his family's personal story, which is in fact a shared experience for so many Africans in their struggle for survival.
He was willing to talk about it. I remember in my childhood, I spent a lot of time discussing with him, a lot of information he gave me, and then he was happy, actually, his participation in the Second World War. From what he told me, about 90,000 soldiers were taken from Nigeria. At that particular time, 45,000 of them went to Burma, and then some were sent to Ethiopia and then some Eastern African countries like that to fight against the Italian forces. And then Italy was on the side of the fascist group. And then them that went to Burma, they fought against the Japanese fascists. So that was, I think, a little bit background of what he told me.
And to understand why so many of these stories were kept in the dark for so long, we must look at why they were deliberately pushed aside, how narratives were shaped in ways that kept African soldiers invisible rather than recognized for their strength and contribution.
Their involvement was not talked about because the British wouldn't want it, it's like an embarrassment for the British colonial masters at that particular time because not just the British colonial masters, even France and then Portugal. So they never wanted because it looks somehow that the people they have been able to cage, subjugate the kind of level that they feel like they are less human beings, were able to achieve the feat they achieved during the Second World War. Their participation, and they showed their strength, and then it was noticeable. But however, for them to acknowledge them, it will be like an affront to the colonial masters, because on the first place, they never saw them as human beings. They saw them as less human beings. And then these people came and then fought vigorously and then were able to achieve the level of victory they achieved. So because of that, the colonial master intentionally took away that history, the stories about them, because it would be an embarrassment.
Through voices like Johnson Emanuel Chukwuka's, the legacy of African soldiers in World War II can be revived, where it will live on in the collective memory, where it belongs.
I'm very proud. There are so many things about their involvement in the war that nobody has ever talked about. And then we have a reason. My interaction with my grandfather gave me understanding about what is happening in the USSR then later Russia. So virtually I have a good understanding of the history of the Russians. And then it's like we took it as a culture. He himself, after the Second World War, he came home, he bought a Russian car, then Lada, and that he was driving in the village then. So we actually celebrate the Victory Day on the 9th of May.
And when memories like these find their rightful place in spaces like this museum, they ensure that future generations will not only remember the past, but they will recognize the shared responsibility in preserving truth, dignity, and freedom.
World War II imprinted itself on every corner of the globe. The theater of war spread from Europe to Oceania and Africa. On this day, the African continent is commemorating the 81st anniversary of the great victory over Nazism in the Second World War. From 1940 to 1941, African soldiers fought for the liberation of the Horn of Africa from fascist Italian occupation. Meanwhile, in North Africa, Allied forces prevented Nazi Germany's armies from advancing deeper into the continent and paving the way to the Middle East in the Second Battle of Alamein. South African and Rhodesian troops, as well as soldiers from Algeria, Egypt, and Tunisia, fought against the Nazi Germany fascist Italian forces in what's known as the Desert War. Africans were also deployed beyond the continent as colonial powers drafted them due to manpower shortages. West African soldiers fought the Japanese in Southeast Asia, and Senegalese soldiers battled the Wehrmacht in France.